Hey everybody, Neon here, another analysis video. This is coming from the WePlay tournament that happened today. Starting today, it's still going on. It's going to be happening all weekend. I am super excited for this. I've been watching some of the coverage. I haven't caught all of the games yet, but holy shit, really great stuff. I've been really enjoying it, and I've been learning a lot about Constructed. If you guys haven't checked out some of that stuff, go ahead and do that. So the game that I have for you guys is Joel Larsson versus StanCifka, both high-level Artifact players and Magic players before that. StanCifka is more famous, I think, for his Hearthstone work. Both of them have actually won Magic Pro Tours, by the way, though. So that's really impressive stuff. This game is a almost mirror match that they had, and I probably like mirror matches more than the average person. I think that there are a lot of people who aren't crazy about them. But this game particularly, I thought was really interesting in some of the decision-making that happened, and I think that the casters missed a couple nuances of what was happening in the game, which is fine. Like, I mean, I think they did an absolutely spectacular job. The casting has been really amazing. I'm a big fan of... It's actually really interesting, the contrast between the different casters that you'll see is, because you have Magai and Impetuous Panda, who are, I think, very serious, taking it very seriously. They have a good thing going on, and then you have Swim and Suns Fan, who are just, you know, clowns, and they're good. They know their stuff too, but the Suns fan specifically is really hilarious on the cast. But anyway, we are going to get into this game. If you're new here, the structure of what we do here is we look at the cast, and then we're gonna actually analyze some of the particular chunks. At the end of it, there'll be a time code that's up on the screen right now. Also, if you have clips, if you have games that you thought were particularly interesting and you want me to cover, just use the description, the submission page that is on my website. It's linked below. And you can, like, for instance, like, you do that, you have a chance to win a $5 Steam gift card. So go ahead and do that. You have a chance to win some free packs that way. So we're gonna get right into the game now then. So let's get started. So, as I mentioned, this is a quasi-mirror match. There are some subtle differences between the two different decks, though. They're both on a version of black-red sort of aggro for it. But one of the things I find interesting about that specifically is that because they're both on black-red aggro, like, this was a lot of the beta testers had originally said that aggro really isn't a thing, but we actually already have an interesting decision right here off the bat, where Joel Larsson, who's on he's Have-A-Clumpin', and then StanCifka is Luckbox. I might be referring to him back and forth as the different words for it. But yeah, so Joel Larsson decides to not use Duel in the first lane. That'll be one of the moments that I go back and analyze afterwards at the end of the video. But other than that, the Bristleback, of course, devoured that Phantom Assassin in the second lane, which obviously worked out quite well for him. But yeah, so some of the differences, though, to point out has to do, I think that the most pronounced is the second black hero on both sides. On Joel Larsson's side, he is running Sorla Khan, as you can see here in the left-hand lane. And then in the right-hand lane, we have the Bounty Hunter for StanCifka. We also see some interesting decision-making already happening in terms of where they're sort of allocating their heroes and prioritizing what's going on. We see here that the StanCifka's Joel Larsson has been prioritizing the left lane already, and that's something that I really noticed in the course of some of the coverage today, is that there were a lot of times where, like, when there was close decisions, players would play in the left lane again and again and again. Like, even times when it kind of seemed like it didn't quite make a lot of sense. One of them particularly that I noticed that did that a lot was Life Coach, who really emphasized putting his resources in the left-hand lane. So that was really interesting, and I think that's a good sign to for everybody who's trying to get better, is maybe think about what in close decisions, like, when in doubt, move stuff into the left lane. Playing out the Aglody Vandal here, just a lot of damage, and then, of course, responding to this with Disciple Nevermore, which this is a reasonable usage of the card, just kind of trading with the 3-drop slot here, and just trying to get a little bit of extra damage on that Sorla as well. Hopefully be able to pick her off sometime soon. Now, one thing to note is that neither of these decks really are playing very much in the way of direct damage spells in order to finish off a hero that's like this. I think some other builds are playing more things like Hipfire and stuff, but I don't think that these guys were playing very much of that. Now here, we have a very natural interaction that I noticed a number of times, which is Axe versus Axe, where it usually is a 3-turn like neutral combo where they kill each other, but then if you have a Viscous Navel Goo, you get to both take down that armor and then also use it, like, take it down in 2 turns. So it's something that if you are seeing a axe heavy metagame or a red heavy metagame and you don't want to go all the way to something like Centaur Warrider, I feel like playing Bristleback is an important way to do that. So if you're playing a either a 2 red, 3 black, or 2 red, like whatever, 3 blue deck, if you are not playing the Bristleback, you could go up to Bristleback and maybe that'll be a good counter to it, because you're able to take that 2 armor off of him permanently in addition to trading more effectively. So if, for instance, one of these 2 players didn't have that Viscous Native Lagoon, I think that they would be in a big lead right now, for the other player would. This is, of course, a hard decision for Joel Larsson about where to go with that Phantom Assassin, because he's just deciding that the right lane is a waste of time. But this is, like, once again, what I was mentioning about what do you prioritize and whether it's the left lane or the center lane, and it's obviously a close decision, but he's deciding to go with the left lane, and I think that that's really neat, and emphasizing once again the importance of this lane over the others. Now, there's a lot of options on both sides here. We can see a few different cards in the hand. There's the duel still that is available that could kill the PA, but I guess you probably wouldn't want to do that right now, given the fact that it's actually now a trade, because there is a little bit of damage on that Bristleback. So definitely a concern. So here then, Joel responds by doing a Viscous Naval Lagoon, or actually rather starts things off by that. Then we get a response of the Furline Mantle on the side of StanCifka. Now, if you weren't paying attention earlier, this was, of course, bought from the secret shop, and this isn't a card that he is playing naturally, as you might imagine here. But this puts things into an interesting position, because Joel could have played out some of his equipment at that point in order to protect his PA, and that combat decides not to bait out the track, and then we get the cloak afterwards. This is actually a moment that I'm going to return to in some of our discussions, because I think that this goes very poorly for Stan as a result of this. Really shifts the momentum of this lane of going from even to Joel being ahead. So that's how that works out. Then we go to the center lane here. We start off by playing out the Bronze Legionnaire, which is obviously, this is the task that he's really meant for, battling creeps, keeping things under control, and also Stan just doesn't have very much in the way of other plays. So now it's Joel's turn. So Red Mist Pillager comes out into that mid lane. This is a problem card for StanCifka to deal with, because it's one of those things that there's just not a lot of AoE in this deck. If you're not playing Lich in black-red, you just have no tools to deal with this. So that's going to end up being something that is a real concern here. 11 gold is not a ton on the Luckbox side of things, and you definitely want to have some decent injections of gold so you can get ahead on those items. It really does make a difference in how a lot of these battles play out. Like, oftentimes it's, especially since there's very little in the way of, like, incidental damage here. It's not like in a blue deck where there's, like, pings here and there, and, like, Zeus pings and conflagration pings, etc., in order to pick things off. Like, when something has a couple of health left on it, it often can stay around for several turns. So that's really difficult here. Axe is going mid on both sides, it looks like, right now. I think that the one who's still deciding is StanCifka. Yeah, you can see that his timer is actually going down here. So he is deciding to go mid as well. So both of those axes mirroring each other once again. But yeah, now we have the Bristleback threatening to kill the Legion Commander, which is quite spooky for Luckbox. He does have the opportunity, though, to duel the Bristleback in order to cancel that out, especially because he doesn't have any healing items that are available to him. It's hard to know how much you should care about that 2 armor versus having the Bristleback there, etc. There are a bunch of different concerns. Like, this is obviously trade, and getting that to damage, spending the duel, it's like the only cheap card that's in your hand, which is very much a concern. You could also just do the Berserker's Column functionally as a duel if you're interested in just being mana efficient. So that's one that I think this is an interesting choice, but he does end up going for the duel, which makes sense to me to a certain degree. If he just wants to keep things kind of neutralized in this lane, slow it down, he's seems to be deciding that this lane is the lane that he's sacking. And we just see here Yol just kind of vomit out a bunch of cards, which, I mean, like just a classic initiative dump sort of thing. I'm saying, like, this sets up a probably 2-turn kill on that left-hand tower, which is pretty attractive. Now, here we have a really hard decision from StanCifka. He has the possibility to do something like Berserker's Call with either of his red heroes would be pretty interesting to do. He also has the opportunity to... He could TP back his Bristleback. He ends up going for the TP. This is one of the decisions that I think is an interesting one to go back to later on. Because this definitely gives a free line of attack for that Red Mist Pillager, which sort of invites it to get out of hand. Yeah, and that opens up another lane for more creeps to get down. Because, like, for instance, if you had done something like the Berserker's Call, then you are forcing your opponent to play creeps in front of the open slots there. But now the lane has been left open, and you have this infestation of Red Mist Pillagers that's just going to get out of hand. I mean, you technically could still do a Berserker's Call now in order to keep things under control. This will mean that one of the... Yeah, so we decides not to do it. We just get the 2 of them that spawn here, and that's really quite the problem. Now, the question here is, like, what do we do? Do we do anything in this lane? Like, there's really not very much in the way of options. So that's very much a concern. The Redtail's Signet Ring, that I actually was a little bit surprised by how much play that sees. I mean, it's a good item. It's a solid item, but it sees a lot of play in these sorts of decks, like particularly with StanCifka's deck. Like, he's playing Bounty Hunter, so there's part of me that feels like you should be playing more cards that take advantage of the fact that you're playing Bounty Hunter, which is he's just clearly not. So here we have a threat of lethal on StanCifka's tower, and StanCifka has the opportunity to either coup de grace the Sorlikon or the Phantom Assassin. Both of them are problematic. Like, I mean, if you want to keep your tower alive, you definitely need to kill Sorlikon. But if you want to get in damage, I think that you want to kill the PA. And also the PA, should be noted, still has a track on it. And it's just been so hard to get value on these tracks. And which is quite problematic. And I think that this is also, you also have the spraying the traps here. If you want to do something like, you could play that out in this lane even in order to try to stop your opponent from taking this down and slow things down. He ends up going for the coup de grace though on the Phantom Assassin. I mean, this seems weird because it does let his opponent get lethal. Like, you're inviting that, like, there's nothing you can do about it. So that's a bit strange as a play, but this is definitely one that I will return to afterwards. He decides to go, then Yol responds with a Assault Ladder in the right lane, in the center lane rather, which will probably mean death for Stan. It'll be really hard to battle back from this. There's just very few cards that do enough, and, like, for instance, like, you have this Bring the Trap to set up a double chump block basically, or you know, double trade even, maybe if you're lucky. But yeah, he's just not going to have an easy time doing that. It's important though to heal first. Like, I think that's the correct decision. Want to stop your opponent from doing something like dueling you. When there's no black hero in lane, there's just nothing that they can really do in order to take him down if he has higher health than Axe. The duels in hand, by the way, for Yol Larsson has just been in play, like, been in his hand all game long, and he hasn't used it, even though he had the opportunity to actually turn one. But he finally is going to use one right now in order to set up lethal on that second tower. So he has found a hole to break down both the first and second tower. So that's good game. So, okay, we're going to go through a couple of the key moments and try to understand sort of what the players were doing and thinking, because I think that there's some interesting ideas going on here. So the first moment that I want to talk about is this one right here with PA and Bristleback. And the reasoning why is that there's an obvious play that you could make of dueling the PA in order to kill it, but that actually does set up the creep to kill the Bristleback afterwards, so this is a little bit obvious of a play. If you played for a little while, you should be able to see that. But I think that the reason that I wanted to bring this up specifically was actually about when you see this kind of arrangement, you should be thinking to yourself, aha, I need to purchase any health item that I can get my hands on. And then I can set up a clean kill on the PA. Like, this is just it feels like the kind of a setup, the kind of a structure of a lane that is going to come up fairly often. So it's worth recognizing that this is the kind of structure and setup that you can see, and when it does come up, just you should instantly recognize it being like, okay, this is, I need a health item of any description, and that this is going to set me up over the edge to be able to kill this PA and then move on with things. So I just wanted to point that out, as it is something that maybe you missed that if you weren't paying a close attention to the math for it, but it is an important little kind of combination of different factors. So let's go on to the next moment. So next is actually a moment that I think is low-key game-winning for Yo Larsson. So we get the Furline Mantle out for StanCifka. We now have a lane where it looks like we're going to have all three of the black heroes actually dying, and just the Bristleback and the Legion Commander left in lane. He then opts to track the PA, at which point Yo Larsson buffs up the PA. Now, he had the opportunity to play that during the previous pause to have his PA actually survive in this combat. But by doing this, he actually is inducing his opponent to play out something like the track and punish him in this way. So the reason why I think that this is low-key game-winning kind of relates to how things play out over the course of the next couple of turns. But what happened here specifically is the fact that the Legion Commander, that we had the track come out in this juncture, it actually didn't matter which of the two black heroes it went on. It would have been possible for Yo Larsson to counter it. He would have been able to do something like play both the cloak and the healing salve on the Fountain Flask rather on the Sorely Khan if that's what he had wanted. I think that he probably would have opted for the PA anyway in order to counter that combat. I am particularly surprised that we didn't see the 25% chance on the try to roll for the Bronze Legionnaire to curve into the PA and maybe try and take that out. Given the fact that some of the other lanes are not going great, I can understand wanting to keep it as a chunk blocker, maybe, but it feels like if you get the 25%, you can really recapture some momentum. But the reason that this then changes things up a lot is that the effect that this does to the lane specifically is, like, if we had just had a pass there and combat just goes, we get Bristleback, Legion Commander, everything else dies, but Legion Commander and Bristleback are now squaring off in a 1v1. Now, after this change has been made and after we have that buff out of the for the PA, now it's PA and Bristleback versus Legion Commander, in which case Legion Commander is definitely going to struggle, especially since they don't have access to black spells even next turn because there's no black hero that's in the queue, and Yo Larsson is going to have, for instance, have access to Coup de Grace or whatever black spells that they want in the next turn. So this was a super subtle play in how it ends up working out and why it's so good. But I think that it's worth thinking about how to incorporate these kinds of passes into your play of saying, like, okay, I do have a move that I can make, but I think that if I don't do anything, I can trick my opponent into doing something, and then I can then punish it. So that was a really smart read on Yo Larsson's part, that he thought that his opponent was going to do something, and he took the bait. So well played on that, but let's go on to the next clip. So the very next play that I'm going to talk about is actually just picking up right on after this, and this is what StanCifka does with that Bronze Legionnaire. We get to the middle lane, and then he immediately plays out in front of a creep. Now, he knows that his opponent plays Red Mist Pillagers. They have access to the deck lists, so he can look at it and see that there is Red Mist Pillagers in the deck, decides not to play around it, and just plays out the Bronze Legionnaire. Also, just like looking at the body language, he didn't even really think about it, which I think is a bit of a concern. You should have spent the time there, because he just kind of like snapped at it. This, though, just punishes him brutally, because he just has no tools to play against the Red Mist Pillagers once they begin to get out of hand, or it's really hard for them to do it, so it's hard to catch up. There's no sweeper effects that he has access to. So there's part of me that feels like he should have played out that Bronze Legionnaire a little bit more slowly, maybe even pass. Like, obviously, it kind of sucks to leave that creep up and take an extra couple tower damage, but it's not like there's an assault ladders in the lane. It's not like there's a lot of 6-drops in your hand, so you probably are going to be able to play it out again next turn anyway. So I'm not totally sure about that. This might be just like, hindsight, caster vision talking, but I feel like he should have played around the Red Mist Pillagers by holding the Bronze Legionnaire in hand, because it would have been a really brutal punish if Joel Larsson plays that out. So that's another moment in the game here. But we'll skip forward a little bit from here. Okay, so for the next moment here, we have the Elsie in the lane with the Bristleback and the Phantom Assassin. We have the opportunity to cast a few different things, like for instance, could duel either the Phantom Assassin or the Bristleback. Decides to duel the Bristleback on StanCifka's side, which eliminates them both from the lane. But this then, of course, sets up Joel for the opportunity to kind of unload some of the stuff in his hand. First, he heals up the PA, plays up the Assassin's Apprentice, and finally plays out an Assault Ladder. So basically, as is tradition with this game, is when Stan makes a play, Joel just seems to have the perfect counter to that here. So this one, though, is interesting because there are a surprising amount of options that are available to Stan in this situation. 1, he could duel the Bristleback. 2, he could duel the PA. 3, he could Blink Dagger out of the lane into either the center or the right lane. 4, he could TP out. 5, he could do nothing. So let's run through them one by one of them. So let's actually start with Blink Dagger. So Blink Dagger into either the middle lane or the right lane. This is very passive. I'm not going to show the lanes right now. The center lane, he would kind of just she would just kind of show up in the middle of some of the action and not really do too much exactly. Maybe it would help battle a little bit there, but it wouldn't, I don't think, change the composition of the lane too much. Next, she could go to the right-hand lane. That is a lane that is, you're slowly pushing it with the bounty hunter that's there. That's not exactly where you want to be, because you definitely don't have the firepower to take down the ancient there, and committing 2 lanes to a tower that you're just kind of really slowly taking feels like a major investment. So those 2 are kind of off the table. So Blink Dagger doesn't really do anything for us. Next, we could duel the Bristleback. The reason that this is interesting is that you're removing the red hero from this lane until the following turn. And this is, actually for a while now, because there's no red hero that's coming up anytime soon. It's possible that your opponent does have a Temporal Scroll in hand and is able to move one over here in the next little while, but having no red hero in this lane for at least the next turn cycle does mean that you can't have the Spring the Traps springing into the other lanes from this lane. That's pretty attractive, but it does leave you open to being Time of Triumph 2 turns from now when he comes back into the lane here. So that's a bit of a problem. 3, so actually, but I mean, I think that also just by doing that too, it should be noted that you stop Bristleback from gaining armor, because in case that's a relevant consideration compared to doing some of the other options of, like, for instance, just having her die. 3, so let's just talk about that one, having her die. You're not going to be able to play out 2 cards this turn, basically, kind of no matter what, especially like the actual cards that cost mana. If you do that, if you're going to the center lane, you can only cast one of the two, Duel or Berserker's Call, because you only have 6 mana. So it feels really passive and slow to do that, and you're kind of just like falling behind on board if you're doing nothing. So you definitely have to do something here to save, to actually interact with the board and keep your opponent from snowballing their advantage. Now, you could, though, duel the PA. This is an interesting line for a couple of reasons. One, the black cards that they have access to on the other side are the ones that are probably the best right now, like this turn, of what we would want to do, because there are not a lot of red 6-drops in the deck, or 5-drops even. Like maybe Yol has a Stonehollow Elite or a Bronze Legionnaire of terms of red threats that they can play out in this lane, but in terms of black threats, there are the Assassin's Apprentice, there is the Assault Ladders that can be played in this lane or into the center lane. So there's a lot that you can do in terms of black cards right now. So there's part of me that feels like you should be more concerned about those, like, right now, especially because if you imagine what the clock looks like for the Bristleback being alone in this lane versus the PA being alone in this lane, it's just, there's a lot better tools for the PA to take this lane by herself over the course of the next 2 turns compared to Bristleback. I think that, like, the most that you could probably expect would be something like 12 damage this turn, and then I guess you could probably do an extra 4 next turn, so it's close though. But in terms of PA taking this by herself is pretty easy. I mean, obviously you're gonna have the Phantom Assassin that's coming into this lane too next turn, so that's can give you some opportunities for counterplay though. But that's kind of like some of my concern. But the final thing that to me puts it, makes that one really, really interesting of killing the PA is that you get the gold from the track that's there. And the reason why is like you're just really constrained in terms of like health buffs and mobility spells. Like you're struggling, for instance, with that bounty hunter that's in the right-hand lane, being able to get a blink dagger for him in the following turn to move him over to somewhere else in the board seems like a really big advantage. So those are all things that I really like. I think that the Town Portal Scroll is one that's also interesting. It probably is too passive, given the fact that it'll allow your opponent to beat the crap out of your tower this turn, and that's just a little bit too low tempo for me, or I'm worried that that'll end up being really low tempo. So I think that the line that I personally like the best is dueling the PA, even though it gives Bristleback the 2 armor. And part of the reason behind that is that you just you are hoping to be able to coup de grace him out next turn, right? Because you have the black hero that's coming in and hoping to be able to maybe try and find a way to get initiative going into that lane. So we'll have to so that's one that I'm not excited about in terms of how this lane ended up going, and I feel like it could have been possible to salvage it at this point, but this really sets it you too far behind in this lane. I mean, obviously it doesn't help that Yol has kind of like the perfect composition of hands to punish you for it, but you definitely put yourself in the position to get punished here. So we're just moving right on into the next lane. Like, once again, we just have like so many interesting decisions in this game. I just kind of like want to go through all of them. This game was particularly excellent. But we have the opportunity here to do a lot of different things. And for example, one of the lines that I'm interested in is just doing Blink Dagger plus Berserker's Call on Axe in order to clean up some of the one of the Red Mist Pillagers, etc. He decides to TP out the Bristleback. I think that this play is really passive, and it really just totally concedes this lane. And if you remember what happened in the last lane, like, you're already in a really bad position in that lane, so like you kind of have to sack left and sack mid by teleporting out there, and you just can't do that. Like, that's 2 lanes that you're sacking, and you're just taking like so much damage here. I really would rather that he would do a Berserker's Call in this situation. It doesn't feel great, but and wouldn't have then teleported out the bristleback. Like, I know it doesn't feel good to do that, but the lane would have ended up looking a lot simpler, and you just can't come back from all of these red mist pillagers. So finally, we're going to get to the last decision point in the game that I thought was really interesting, and this is about the coup de grace that happens on the Phantom Assassin here in the first lane on the 7-mana turn. This is one that the casters didn't like particularly because it does let you die here with the Sword of the Khan obviously hitting pretty hard, but I think that this was a case of trying to play to win versus not lose. And in that case, I kind of respect it. Just saying, I kind of have to have you, your hand has to be garbage in order for me to find a win from here. And because that mid lane is bad for me, and I don't know if I can beat a good hand one way or another. And you need to find a second lane, right? Like, he's taking the right lane, like, so slowly. Like, obviously, it's at 1 health right now. So we have it in the next turn, but like maybe there's a way to take this tower in 2 turns. So a part of the ingredients to take that down is through killing that PA, clearing a path for your own PA, getting some damage in. But unfortunately, this does basically guarantee his death in that center lane because of the assault ladders that came out. So there's just not a lot of choices here. It has to spring the trap, kind of hope for the best. In this case, by the way, also the sequencing is correct to do the healing potion first and etc. because you just want to keep him out of range of being able to be dueled once again. As a reminder there. But yeah, so we get out the spring the trap. We have the axe on the other side is able to duel one of these centaurs down and then sets up lethal. But I think that this was, like, it was a risky play to coup de grace the PA and just saying, like, again, like you have to have very little, you have to have very weird hand for me to do it. Like, I mean, I guess the assault ladders was one of the big factors, but this is also kind of like what happens when you let the red mist pillagers get out of control. You just can't let that happen in this sort of deck. So playing around it, very carefully, because I think that's really the card that won the game for him for Yol. So I think that was really interesting. But anyway, that'll do it for today. This was a really interesting game. Of course, you can find a link to the entire stream below. But that'll be it for me. Take care, everybody. Of course, submit your games. Check out Ink Gaming. They're our sponsor. They do wonderful work. And yeah, just happy to have you here today. I'm looking forward to looking at more constructed action over the course of the next couple of days. So take care, everyone.